Guess what, sir? Right in the middle of lunch, I'm going to come over and bother you. One of my all-time heroes, one of the members of the Mangler team. These guys were the best. So what we're doing is asking for a Donovan story. There ought to be how many of those?
Well, first of all, Donovan wanted us to plaster this inside of this building before they moved here. So me and my brother and our crew, he wanted something pretty fast, so we had thin wall plastering at the time. So we did the crow's nest and all the restrooms and most of the walls. It looks pretty good.
It's still hanging in there.
Yeah, so...
was he involved when you guys got the Mangler to begin with?
Donovan?
As far as helping you with parts?
Donovan, well, Dawes Wafer and I lived together, and he worked for Donovan. Mm-hmm. And we lived in Englewood, and Donovan was unique. He'd help anybody. Okay? He was, you don't find him like that. So he kind of looked after us, even though we were running Keith Black racing engines on our car, which we had Donovan valve covers on the Keith Black racing engine. He loved that. Okay. He helped us with parts. He helped us. One of the big deals when I raced with McEwen, we were number 2, so we had to challenge. You could only get challenged number 1 drag news, the number 1 if you were number 2. So we decided that McEwen decided, being the entrepreneur he was, that he would bring the Greek out here. We had to give him $800 to come out here to race for number 1. I said, McEwen, that doesn't make sense. You know, he's getting the big money. He said, well, you have to do it. We'll win. So we ran pretty good. A week before, he got us a block. We changed the block. Keith put the motor together. And at that time, we didn't have, I was still plastering. And McEwen was running the shotgun with his Oldsmobile station wagon, chasing all the parts. And Donovan called him Llewellyn Parsons. Llewellyn Parsons was a Hollywood gossip person. So we brought the Greek out, and the Greek staged over on Regent Street. We'd go over there. We blew the motor the week before, so we had to hurry and put it together. So the match race was 2 out of 3. They must have had 20,000 people with no stands out of Pomona. Number 1, number 2. We went to fire the motor for the first round, and it didn't light. Stump was trying to figure it. Keith was trying to figure it. Stump put his hand on top of the injectors. We had a Hilborn on there, and he was hopping around. And that is when Eskandarian, who was the Greek was sponsoring, ran the ad, "Keep her lit." That's where it came from.
Really?
Keep her lit.
And it was a T-shirt too, wasn't
Yes,
it?
absolutely.
Just to rub it in a little more.
Oh yeah, Donovan loved that, and anyway, he was a great guy, and I don't know what else to say, but
we all miss him.
oh, he would have loved this.
Yeah, that's where I take mine. That's great.
Bainey, Zuchel. I just met Zuchel's second wife. She saw my little patch, and I told her that Tony and I went to England together in 1965, I think, with them guys.
Yep.
We partied.
Good times.
In Paris. I called Tony Antoine. We both had berets on, running down in the red alley parts of Paris. So.
Perfect.
And one of the favorite sayings of Donovan and Dawes was a machinist. He and I lived together for a while in Englewood. And I think Wayne King was the driver of that car down in Carlsbad. So Dawes brought his girlfriend, beautiful Hispanic girl. And Dawes didn't look at what he was doing, so Donovan said, back the truck up. Well, back the station wagon up. He backed the station wagon up and pinned Donovan up against the chain link fence. Donovan was yelling and screaming, everything, and he said, "That's it. No tits in the pits." Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Thank you.
I always wondered where that came from.
Yeah.
I always wondered.
Well, that's where it came from.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
We're moving on, and
Give me your name, please.
Okay, Norman Woodruff.
Okay, Norman, very good.
I'm Woody to everybody.
Very good. Okay. So tell me about you're his first employee. Ed's first employee. When was that? How far back do we go?
That was in 1959.
1959. Okay.
Yeah, on a little shop on Regent Street in Englewood,
Yeah.
and I'd been around working in a machine shop for a few years, and I just wanted to go hot rodding, and so I got introduced to Ed and was very impressed with him, and I guess he was getting ready to hire somebody, so he hired me, and I worked there for about a year. Is about all longer I worked there, but I got some really neat things happened. That was the time when Don Garlitz came out here.
Oh, really? Tell
For
us
the
that
March
story.
meet.
Yeah. What was that?
And anyway, he walked in the shop, and Don was not the polished character he is now. I mean, this guy looked like he was right out of the slums somewhere. And, really skinny and needed a haircut. And Ed said, "Throw that bum out of here." And I said, "But that's Don Garlitz." And he didn't know who Garlitz was at the time. He says, "I don't care, get rid of him."
Yeah. Wow.
So I kind of smoothed that deal over.
Good job.
And then Ed Eskandarian used to come around all the time. And that's, he just had a shop down the street. Everybody was in Englewood then.
Right.
And one of our customers was Ed Pink. And I started learning about really putting some quality into a dragster from Ed, because at that time everything was pretty crude. And that's one of the things that motivated Donovan was there were a lot of people getting hurt and killed and everything else just because this crummy equipment everybody was running.
That's what I'm beginning to understand here. I've been talking to enough people that it had a lot to do with safety and wanting things to stay together and allow people to compete at a higher level and not have things come apart.
That was exactly it. Like Ed, prior to starting his own business, had worked for Meyer Drake for a few years and saw what they were putting in engines. The billet cranks, the good stainless valves, and the fact that everything was really close tolerance. It's nothing sloppy about an Offie.
Right.
And that's he brought that with him. Ed was an outstanding machinist. Back in the days when you turned the handles by hand, and he could really run a Bridgeport. He could do things that you couldn't believe.
Wow.
And then later on, I guess it was after here, he lost his lease in Englewood. The best thing that ever happened to him. And he had to move somewhere, and he wound up buying this piece of property in the outskirts of Torrance. And as I recall, between the building and the property in 1968, cost him $80,000.
Man, this is a beautiful facility for $80,000.
Yeah. Of course, that was $80,000 1968 dollars.
Right, sure.
And but anyway, and he was sweating bullets. But he managed to put it together, and then he had to. Along the way there, he realized he had to come up with a unique product, or up to that point, it was just a machine shop.
Right.
So he was seeing at the time the old 392 Chryslers is what all the fuel guys are running.
Right.
And they were breaking them. They're blowing the cylinders out of them. So he decided to make one out of aluminum, and that was the 417. And the first one of them he ever built, well, he built two side by side, and the first one went into John Weeby's car. And that was kind of a humorous deal because a a lot of people wanted it to go in there, but he really liked John, liked the way he did things. So it was just a major thrash putting the thing in his car. And at like 3:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning, the Sunday that they were going to go racing, they finally got it put together and they rolled it out in the parking lot and fired the thing up on 90% nitro. And the police came pretty quickly, and they just thought it was all cool.
Yeah, sure.
And they went out, and he set top time and low ET.
You're kidding.
First time out. He did not win the race. He got to the final round and blew the tires off, which
Okay.
everything just made a lot more power. And then the next Monday, there were probably 15 people out front wanting to buy one of these things,
Great
and
story.
he only had one for sale, and it took him a year and a half to make it. So he
Great story. Great story.
and but anyway, he kind of got some more equipment, some more people in here, and started cranking them out, and that was the block to have until later on when Keith Black and I think Joe Paisano at the same time made a 426 block, and everything kind of gravitated to that. But
Right.
that was really a dynamic time. Well, it was fun being around here. And Ed was such a funny character. You just never knew what he was going to do next. He was about half nuts. And
Well, you had to be an innovator and break the mold, so to speak, to step
Yeah.
out and do things that people hadn't done.
yeah, because to make that block, I mean, nobody had the cojones to do something. He invested everything in that. And if that didn't work, I mean, he was toast.
Right.
And by golly, it worked. And that was in '72 when he finally got one of them. And like I say, it was about 18 months from the time he thought of it till he actually had one,
Right.
and doing most of the work on a Bridgeport.
Yeah, oh wow.
It was
Amazing. All right. Well, those are great stories to now, and that speaks to, the fact that he was a great guy. We miss him. I think.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I never did lose contact with him, and then when he got sick, I started coming in here and helping him out a bit with some tooling and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then after he died, I told Kathy that if we can figure out a way to get a machining center in here to make these blocks, I'll retire from where I'm at and come to work here. And damned if she didn't do it. So I had to live up to it, and so I retired from TRW then. Came to work here, and that was about 18 years ago.
So Kathy's been a big part of this store keeping going, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, if it wasn't for her, it would have died in 1988 along with Ed Donovan. Because Ed has 4 children, and none of them were really interested in doing anything. And it took somebody with a lot of dedication, because they had the building, but they had no money.
Right.
And you still got to pay your employees.
Sure you do.
And might add a big part of the paying of the employees was his old friend Frank Startup, who owned a bicycle shop and did quite well. Ed would go to him quite often when he was a little short on payroll, and Startup would just give him cash. Now, Startup always got paid back,
Right.
but
Right.
that was kind of a leap of faith on Frank's part, and he's been a good friend and a mentor around here ever since, and a lot of business savvy. That Ed, he didn't want to be a businessman. He
Right.
wanted to be an innovator and a racer.
Right.
And in fact, quite often he would get something really working well, and he'd get tired of it. He'd have one of his competitors take over. Like all the driveline stuff that Ed created went to Glenn Sander, who is doing quite well with it now. But Ed didn't want to be tied up, making the same thing over and over again.
Right.